So I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine spending like $10,000 on the tools you need to do your job. And this is over the course of a decade, right?
Right.
You've mastered these tools. You rely on them completely. They hold literally the entirety of your professional output.
Yeah.
But if your credit card expires tomorrow, you are legally locked out of your life's work by noon.
Completely shut out.
Exactly. I mean, your files are still there somewhere on a server, but your access is just gone. And well, welcome to the modern era,
Yeah.
where we have slowly, almost without even noticing it, transitioned from being actual property owners to basically digital tenants.
We really have. I mean, we're living in this system right now where the whole architecture of our daily lives, so our tools, our media, the ways we communicate, it all operates entirely on a permission basis.
Right.
It's a complete shift from possession to permission. And it honestly changes the fundamental mechanics of how society functions.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We are unpacking this massive, fascinating dossier. It's simply titled Renting versus Owning.
Yeah, and it covers a lot of ground.
Oh, it's huge. And to be clear, this isn't just a basic personal finance thing about like whether you should lease a Honda Civic or buy it.
Right. No, it's way deeper than that.
Way deeper. We're looking at the heavy machinery behind this shift. So the historical evolution of property, the economic math of what they call ongoing extraction, the psychological toll of this whole subscription economy.
And even the philosophical roots, right? Like, what does it actually mean to look at something and claim it's mine?
Exactly. We are going to figure out why things that were once proudly owned by people are now just perpetually rented. Who is engineering this societal shift? And crucially, how you, the listener, can reclaim your autonomy in an increasingly, well, permission-based world.
Yeah, and I think to set the analytical baseline here right off the bat, we have to recognize that owning versus renting, it's not a binary choice.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, it's not just an on or off switch, it's a spectrum. So on the far end of ownership, you have absolute control, you have permanence, but you also have a really heavy burden of responsibility.
Right, like if the roof caves in, that's your problem.
Exactly. But then on the renting end of the spectrum, you have immediate access, you have ultimate flexibility, but, and this is the catch, your inescapable dependency.
Yeah.
You are permanently tethered to whatever company is providing that access.
And I actually want you, the listener, to run a mental audit right now while you're listening to us. Think about the last 24 hours of your life.
Oh, that's a good exercise.
Right. Like the music you listened to on your commute today, the software you used to send your work emails, the movie you watched on the couch after dinner. What percentage of that do you legally actually own?
Probably very, very little.
Almost nothing. What percentage can be vanished into the ether if a server goes down or a company just, decides to update its terms of service? We are renting our digital lives.
And increasingly our physical lives, too. I mean,
Wait, yeah, people are literally subscribing to couches now and wardrobes. It's wild.
it is wild, renting clothes, renting furniture. But to understand how we got here, the dossier points out that we really have to look backward. Because widespread ownership, this idea that the average person should possess their own slice of the world,
Right.
it's actually a bizarre historical anomaly.
Yeah, that part of the text completely blew my mind because it shatters this modern assumption we all have that personal property is just like the default human condition.
Right, we just assume it's always been this way,
Mm-hmm.
but for the vast majority of recorded history, almost nobody owned anything.
Right.
If you look at the pre-industrial era, so essentially everything before the 1800s, the dominant operating system of the world was feudalism.
Feudalism, right.
Yeah, the land was held by the nobility or the monarchy,
Right.
and the peasants didn't rent the land in the way we understand renting an apartment today.
No, they were literally fixtures of the land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't a transaction.
It was a cosmology. I mean, the hierarchy was framed as a divine order, You didn't, like, browse a marketplace for a lord to serve. You just belonged to the fiefdom.
Right.
Ownership in that era wasn't about having consumer goods. Ownership equaled absolute, unchecked power over resources and the people living on them.
Precisely. And then, the Industrial Revolution hits from the 1800s through the end of World War II.
Right.
And you get this massive migration of people moving from agrarian life into urban centers.
Yeah.
So we see the explosion of urban factory renting.
Tenement housing, millions of workers packed into cities.
Exactly. Now, this era did see the slow kind of grinding emergence of consumer goods ownership.
Right.
A worker might own their clothes, maybe some basic tools, a little bit of furniture.
But true asset ownership, the kind that actually generates wealth or gives you long-term stability, that was still brutally concentrated at the very top.
Yes. Which brings us to the era that I think completely broke our modern perspective, the post-World War II boom.
Right, from like 1945 to the 1980s. The dossier refers to this as the golden age of ownership, but it makes a huge point to highlight how highly subsidized and, honestly, economically weird it was.
Yeah. Anomalous is the perfect word. The post-war period in the West, particularly in the United States, was just a perfect storm.
Right.
You had massive government intervention like the GI Bill. You had entire continents rebuilding from rubble, which meant unprecedented manufacturing dominance for the U.S.
And that created this highly engineered push toward home ownership, didn't it?
It did. The 30-year mortgage was popularized.
Mm.
Entire suburban landscapes were basically willed into existence out of nowhere, and the middle class expanded dramatically.
And it wasn't just housing, it was durable goods, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Washing machines, automobiles, refrigerators, televisions. Having the actual title to these physical objects became the definitive cultural marker that you had, arrived.
It was the American dream realized in physical objects.
Exactly. And this era hardwired an equation into our collective psyche that we are still dealing with today, which is owning equals stability and owning equals adulthood.
But the problem is, we judge our current financial reality against a blip in human history.
Right.
We are measuring our success against a total economic aberration.
I was thinking about it like this. It's like entering a marathon, but the previous generation got to run it with a massive tailwind on a downhill slope.
All right, exactly.
And now we're running it uphill into a hurricane, wondering why our times are so much worse. We're playing life on hard mode, but being judged by the scoring system of the golden age.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
But, the text goes even further. It dissects what it calls the illusion of ownership, even during that exact golden age.
Oh, yeah. The mortgage paradox.
Right, because even at its absolute peak, ownership wasn't as absolute as it felt.
No, I mean, you have the white picket fence, you have the deed. But if you miss 3 mortgage payments, you find out very quickly who actually owns the property.
Exactly. The bank owns it. You've purchased a highly leveraged slice of equity, not absolute sovereignty.
Yeah. And as we moved into the late 20th century, the cracks in that absolute ownership model really started to widen.
We saw massive credit expansion. People maintained the aesthetic of ownership, like having the nice car and the big TV, but they were doing it entirely via debt.
We also saw the explosion of car leasing, right? The culture was just quietly pivoting.
It was. And then the digital era drops the hammer. From the 2000s onward, access just completely, violently overtakes ownership.
Entertainment is the clearest lens for this, I think.
Oh, for sure.
If you think about it, we went from the movie theater,
Yeah.
which is purely rented access, you pay for a seat, watch the film, and leave, to the DVD and CD era.
Which the dossier notes was the absolute zenith of personal media ownership.
Right.
You possessed the physical disc. The transaction was final. The studio couldn't just sneak into your living room and take the DVD back because some licensing agreement expired.
But look at how fast we abandoned it for the cloud.
I know.
We leaped straight from having a physical bookshelf full of movies to just opening Spotify and Netflix. We traded all that permanence for infinite convenience.
We really did.
But, okay, let's unpack this. This is the mechanism I really want to understand. Because this wasn't just, like, a technological accident, right? It was a highly calculated economic transition.
Totally.
The business world didn't just stumble into the subscription model. They engineered it to change how capital flows.
Yeah, they moved us from a transaction-driven economy to an extraction-driven economy.
This is a terrifying phrase, honestly. Extraction-driven.
It is, but from a corporate finance perspective, it makes total sense. Think about the transaction model where I sell you a DVD once. That is an incredibly exhausting way to run a business.
Right.
If I want more money from you next year, I have to invent a completely new product, manufacture it, market it, distribute it, and somehow convince you to buy it all over again.
You literally have to earn the customer's money every single time.
Exactly. But the extraction model. Wall Street looks at the extraction model and sees infinite, frictionless growth.
Right. The dossier lays out the underlying math here, and it starts with MRR, monthly recurring revenue.
Yes, MRR is the holy grail for these companies. In a transaction business, revenue is spiky, right? It's unpredictable.
Okay.
But MRR allows a company to forecast exactly how much cash is coming in, next month, next quarter, next year.
Because everyone's card is just on auto pay.
Right. And because of that predictability, the financial markets reward those companies with massive valuation multiples.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
Well, a traditional software company that relies on one-time sales might be valued at, say, 3 times its annual revenue.
Okay.
But a SaaS company, software as a service, with strong MRR, they might be valued at 15 times their revenue.
Wow. 15 times.
The financial incentive to switch to subscriptions is just gravitational. They literally can't afford not to do it.
Okay, so that's MRR. The second pillar the dossier outlines is customer lock-in. And this isn't just about brand loyalty, like preferring Coke over Pepsi. This is about data gravity and switching costs.
Oh, this is huge.
Right. If I use a streaming music service for 5 years, it's not just that I like their app interface. My entire algorithmic identity is trapped on their servers.
Yes. Your curated playlists, the engine that knows exactly what tempo of music you want on a Tuesday morning while you're running gigs.
Exactly. It's all locked in. If I want to switch to a competitor to save $2 a month, I have to abandon my musical identity and start from scratch. The psychological switching cost is enormous.
Which naturally leads to the third pillar the text covers. Massively increased lifetime value, or LTV.
Oh, the math on this is brutal.
It really is. In the old transaction model, you buy a premium piece of software for, say, $200. You use it for 5 years. Your LTV to that company is exactly $200.
Right.
But in the modern extraction model, you pay $20 a month for access. Over those same 5 years, your LTV is $1,200.
That's $1,000 extra dollars.
Exactly. And they haven't necessarily provided 6 times the value. They have simply changed the architecture of the toll booth to ensure continuous financial drainage.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though, because I have to challenge this framing for a second.
Go for it.
Let's look at the case for the subscription economy, because the dossier doesn't just paint it as a pure corporate villain story.
Right. It's nuance.
The most powerful argument in the text is the lowered barrier to entry. Think about it. If I am a 19-year-old kid trying to start a graphic design hustle in my bedroom, under the old model, I would need $1,000 up front just to legally acquire the design software.
Which most 19-year-olds don't have.
Right. I'd be priced out of my own ambition before I even started. But under the extraction model, I just need $20. I can download the app and start working immediately. Doesn't this model completely democratize access to the economy?
Well, the democratization of access is undeniable. You're completely right. By removing that huge upfront capital requirement, you invite millions of participants into the market who would otherwise be excluded.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the model theoretically funds continuous innovation.
How so?
Well, under the old transaction model, you are stuck with the 2018 version of a software until you cough up the money to buy the 2024 version.
Oh, right. The dreaded upgrade fee?
Exactly. In the subscription model, the software is a living organism. It is patched, secured, and upgraded weekly. You also maintain ultimate flexibility. If your graphic design business fails in month 3, you just cancel the subscription. You aren't stuck with an expensive, depreciating piece of software you can't use.
That's true. But if that's the case against is where the math gets genuinely disturbing for the average person.
Yeah, it really does.
The text calls it death by 1,000 cuts.
That's the perfect phrase for it.
Right. Because you don't really feel a $10 charge. You don't agonize over a $15 charge. But you start stacking them. The software, the streaming media, the extra cloud storage for your photos, the fitness app, the premium news, the meal kits.
Suddenly an individual is hemorrhaging like $500 a month in these micro drains.
And this brings us to the core economic mechanism at play here, which the dossier really highlights: the loss of wealth building through risk transfer.
Yes. Let's use the classic landlord-tenant example to explain this.
Okay.
When you own a house, you hold the asset, right? But you also hold the risk. If the boiler explodes in the middle of winter, you have to absorb that catastrophic cost.
It's all on you.
Right. But when you rent an apartment, the landlord absorbs the risk of the boiler exploding. You don't pay for that repair. However, they charge you a premium on your rent every single month for that service. You are paying for the convenience of risk mitigation.
Oh, I see where this is going. The sharecropping analogy in the dossier.
Exactly. So in the agricultural era, sharecropping emerged as a system where you were given access to the land and the tools to farm it.
Right.
But because you didn't own the land or the tools, the landlord extracted the vast majority of the yield. You did all the work, but you kept very little of the profit.
Wow.
The modern digital equivalent is remarkably similar. You are sustaining access to the tools of modern life, but you are building zero equity.
Man, that's bleak.
It is. Every dollar spent on a subscription is a dollar that vanishes into a corporate balance sheet. Rather than accumulating in your own net worth, you are continuously funding someone else's asset accumulation.
And the demographics of this, the generational divide, it's just stark.
It really is a generational story.
The dossier shows how boomers and Gen X were able to enter the housing and asset markets when costs were far more proportional to their wages.
Right. They took on the risk, sure, but they harvested the equity. They built wealth.
But millennials and Gen Z, they are looking at an economy with astronomical entry costs for basic assets, massive student debt loads, stagnant real wages. They are essentially forced into this neo-renting economy.
Right, because they can afford the monthly subscription to maintain a modern lifestyle, but the barrier to actual ownership is a fortress.
They are caught in a structural trap. The system sustains their daily life, but it structurally prevents the accumulation of long-term wealth.
And the corporations absolutely know this, which is why we see the phenomenon of quiet price creep.
Oh, I hate the price creep.
We all do,
Yeah.
because there is no longer a distinct moment of repurchase pain.
What do you mean by repurchase pain?
Well, think about when you had to physically go to a store, pick up a box with the new version of a software, and hand the cashier $100. You actively asked yourself in that moment, do I really need this? Is this worth $100 today?
Right. It was a conscious decision, but when a subscription goes from $12.99 to $14.99 a month, you don't even notice. It just auto-deducts.
Exactly. The friction has been totally removed from the transaction. You don't have to consent to the purchase every month. You have to actively fight to cancel it.
And if you stop paying, or if the company changes its mind, the asset just evaporates.
Poof, gone.
We've all experienced this with digital media. You click buy on a digital movie on some platform, but if you actually read the terms of service...
Nobody does.
Right, nobody does. But if you read it, you realize you haven't bought a movie at all. You have bought a revocable, non-transferable license to stream a file.
Right.
If that platform loses its distribution deal with the studio tomorrow, that movie vanishes from your library. You have no recourse.
None whatsoever.
Wait, okay. If the math is this hostile to long-term wealth, and if the terms of service are this fragile, why do we embrace it so willingly?
That's the big question.
Right. Like, why do we sign up for the furniture rental and the endless sauce drains? This is where the dossier transitions into the psychology of the neo-renting economy, and I think this part exposes a massive cognitive blind spot we all share.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because the psychology of ownership is deeply primal for humans.
Right.
When we own something, we graft a piece of our identity onto it. Think of a master craftsman's tools or a musician's favorite guitar. It provides a sense of permanence. It's an anchoring mechanism.
But the psychological trade-off, the dossier notes, is that ownership creates a profound burden.
Yes. It requires maintenance, it requires defense, insurance, and physical space.
And renting exploits our desire to shed that burden.
Completely. Renting feels light, it feels non-binding, you know?
Yeah, you can subscribe to a designer wardrobe, wear the clothes for a month, and just box them up and send them back.
Right. No dry cleaning, no closet space taken up. The psychological friction is practically zero.
But the hidden cost of that lightness is complete dependency.
Exactly. And this leads to what the dossier highlights as the always-on cost.
This concept fascinated me.
It's a really new type of cognitive load that is unique to the subscription era.
Right, like when you buy a physical book, the transaction concludes, you put it on your shelf, your brain categorizes the event as finished.
Yes, but subscriptions create this pervasive, low-level financial anxiety. It's like a background app, constantly running in your subconscious, calculating, am I using this enough to justify the $15 this month? Should I cancel it? But what if I need it next week?
It just depletes your mental bandwidth.
It really does.
I was thinking of it like a slow leak in a tire.
Oh, that's good. Oh.
You don't notice it day to day because of, price obfuscation. It's just a tiny hiss of air. But eventually you wake up one day and you're completely stranded. It creates this whole portfolio of unresolved obligations.
And it actively changes how we relate to the world around us.
Right.
Let's go back to the physical bookshelf versus the streaming app example.
Okay.
When you look at a physical collection of media books or DVDs that you spent years acquiring, it feels like a reflection of your taste. It feels like a personal achievement.
Yeah, it's a piece of who you are.
But when you open a streaming app with its infinite, algorithmically generated rows,
I feel nothing. Honestly, it feels like chores. It's just an endless parade of unfulfilling micro decisions.
Right. Because we don't own the library, we invest far less of our identity into it.
And that leads to this weird transience of identity. When everything around you is temporary, when your software, your media, your car, maybe even your shelter are all conditional upon the next billing cycle, life starts to feel really unanchored.
You develop a learned dependency. You basically acclimate to the idea that you are merely a guest in the systems you rely on for survival and expression.
And that feeling of being a guest, of feeling utterly powerless when the landlord just decides to change the locks, that brings us to what I think is the most complex part of this entire deep dive.
The philosophical foundation.
Right, because this isn't just about Netflix updating its user interface. This cuts to the very philosophical bedrock of what it means to be a human being with rights. Like, how did we even invent the concept of property in the first place?
Well, to understand the modern dilemma, the text says we have to look back at the Enlightenment, specifically the philosopher John Locke.
Okay, Locke.
Locke introduced a concept that was, at the time, absolute philosophical dynamite. He proposed three fundamental natural rights: life, liberty, and property.
Which, obviously, Thomas Jefferson famously remixed into life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for the Declaration of Independence.
Right. But Locke's original inclusion of property was revolutionary. Because before Locke, as we discussed with the feudal system, property was a top-down decree.
The king owned the land because God said so, and the king graciously let you live on it.
Exactly. But Locke flipped the entire architecture of power upside down. He argued what's known as the labor theory of property.
How does that work?
He stated that every individual inherently owns their own body, and by extension, they own the labor of their body.
Right.
Therefore, when a person mixes their labor with the natural world, so say, by chopping down a tree and building a chair, they imbue that object with a piece of themselves.
Ah, I see.
The chair becomes their property, entirely independent of any king's decree. This framework became the intellectual justification for resisting monarchies, and it laid the groundwork for modern capitalism. Property became the ultimate mechanism for individual freedom.
But, and this is crucial, the dossier does not let Locke off the hook here.
Not at all.
It highlights a massive, horrifying paradox. This exact philosophy, which was designed to guarantee human autonomy, was weaponized to enact the most brutal subjugation in human history.
Yes. We have to confront the dark history of property rights. The Lockean ideal sounds very pure in a vacuum. But in reality, it was used to justify global land conquest.
Right.
European powers arrived in the Americas. They observed indigenous populations who did not utilize European-style agricultural methods, and they just declared the land unimproved.
And therefore, according to Locke's theory, open for the taking.
Exactly. It was legal theft, entirely laundered through the philosophy of property rights.
And then it reaches its absolute darkest manifestation, which is the institution of slavery. The exact same legal framework built to ensure a farmer couldn't have his land seized by a king was violently twisted to classify human beings as livestock. It is the ultimate contradiction of the ownership concept.
It really is.
Yeah.
It happens when the legal right to own is elevated above another human being's fundamental right to exist.
Which is why the text emphasizes that the Western Locke-inspired model of I draw a line in the dirt and everything inside it is exclusively mine, that is not the only way humans have functioned.
No, the dossier examines non-Western and indigenous models of land relationship, too.
Right.
In many of these frameworks, the grammar of absolute possession doesn't even exist regarding natural resources. You don't own the land. The land is something you belong to.
It's a completely different paradigm.
It is. The system is based on stewardship and use rights.
Yeah.
It's a shift from this is mine to destroy or hoard to this is ours to maintain for the next generation.
Now, the text also provides a very impartial breakdown of how modern macroeconomic theories view this dynamic, specifically looking at capitalism versus socialism.
Right. And to be clear, we are just reporting the frameworks exactly as they are laid out in the dossier.
Yeah.
We aren't taking a side here.
Exactly, just looking at how they view the spectrum of renting versus owning. So, capitalist theory places private ownership at the absolute center of human progress.
Yes. The logic is that if you can own the rewards of your risk and your labor, you will naturally be incentivized to innovate. And that innovation lifts society as a whole. In this view, ownership is the primary engine of wealth generation.
Right. But conversely, socialist and communist theories argue that when private individuals or corporations own the massive fundamental resources like the land, the factories, the major industries, they inevitably use that leverage to exploit the working class.
Right.
Therefore, the theory argues key productive assets should be collectively or state-owned to ensure equitable distribution. Though the text is careful to note that even in Marxist theory, personal property like your clothes or your books is distinct from private property like a steel mill.
Yes, that's an important distinction. But here is the massive twist that the dossier points out regarding our current situation.
Yeah, this is key.
When people look at the modern subscription economy, where you rent your software, you lease your car, you don't own your movies, they sometimes panic and say, oh no, this is creeping socialism, nobody owns anything anymore.
Right, you hear that a lot. But the dossier says that is a fundamental misdiagnosis of what is actually happening.
Completely. The current hyper-subscription model has absolutely nothing to do with socialism or collective ownership. The state isn't seizing Netflix for the public good.
No, the corporations haven't surrendered ownership at all. They have consolidated it.
Exactly. It is an emergent, hyper-optimized feature of late-stage capitalism. The corporations realize that selling you ownership of a product puts a hard cap on their profit.
Right, you pay once and you're done.
So replacing your ownership with perpetual access is simply a superior mechanism for endless capital extraction. You aren't losing your property rights to a collective commune. You are surrendering them to a corporate landlord.
Wow. Okay, I want to push this into the weirdest frontier the text covers, which is intellectual property.
Oh, this gets really tricky.
It does, because we intuitively understand how to own a physical object, right? If I hold an apple, you cannot hold that exact same apple. Physical scarcity creates the need for property rules. But how on earth do you own an idea? How do you put a fence around a melody?
Well, intellectual property, or IP, is an artificial construct. It was designed specifically to incentivize creation.
Okay, what's the logic there?
The logic is entirely pragmatic.
Yeah.
If you spend 3 years researching and writing a brilliant novel, but the moment it's published, a massive printing company just copies the text and sells it for a penny, you will starve.
Right, and then you'll never write another book.
Exactly. So copyrights, patents, and trademarks exist to grant creators a temporary, legally enforced monopoly over their work so they can actually profit from it.
Okay, I get the pragmatism, but philosophically, it's totally unstable, isn't it? Because ideas are inherently non-scarce. If I tell you a joke, I haven't lost the joke. Now we both have it. The resource multiplied, it didn't deplete. So I have to ask, why are we applying the brutal rules of physical land scarcity to human thought?
That right there is the breaking point of IP law, because human creativity is entirely derivative.
Right.
Every single new song is built on the chord progressions of past songs. Every scientific breakthrough stands on the shoulders of prior research. Drawing a definitive line of who owns what is basically a legal fiction.
Right.
So the law attempts a compromise. You cannot own a fundamental fact or a mathematical truth, but you can own the specific expression of that fact.
And then artificial intelligence arrives and just drops a bomb on that entire fragile compromise.
It really breaks the whole system.
Because AI models like the large language models we see today, they don't create out of thin air. They are trained by ingesting massive oceans of public data, millions of copyrighted books, articles, illustrations, code bases. They map the statistical relationships between words and pixels to generate novel outputs. So the big question is, who owns the training data? And who owns the output?
It's the ultimate crisis of the ownership model. Let's say an AI reads 10,000 copyrighted mystery novels to learn the mechanics of a plot.
Okay.
And then it writes a completely original mystery novel in 10 seconds. Has it stolen the labor of those thousands of authors? Or has it simply learned from them, just as a human author would?
Wow.
We are entering an era where economic value is completely decoupled from human labor, and the legal frameworks we built in the 1700s are completely unequipped to handle it.
Which leads to an inescapable reality. The companies that own these AI models, the companies that own the massive data centers, they are capturing the value generated by the entire internet.
Yes.
Which transitions us perfectly into the mechanics of modern monopolies. We have to examine what happens when this level of wealth and data transforms into unaccountable power.
So when we hear the word monopoly, our historical reference point is usually Standard Oil or the railroad barons of the Gilded Age.
Right, the guy with the monocle and the top hat.
Exactly. But those were exclusionary monopolies. They achieved power by physically buying up the supply chain. Standard Oil bought all the oil refineries and all the pipelines. If you wanted to compete, you literally couldn't physically move your oil. It was physical dominance.
But the dossier identifies a new mutation today, the platform monopoly.
Yes.
We are talking about the titans of the modern web. Google dominating search, Meta owning the social graph, Amazon controlling logistics and cloud computing, Apple commanding the mobile app ecosystem.
Right.
These companies didn't necessarily buy all their competitors. They built something far more inescapable based on network effects.
And we really need to explain how a network effect functions mechanically, because it is the core engine of modern monopolization.
Okay, let's break it down.
In a traditional business, say you sell chairs, the value of the chair remains the exact same, whether one person buys it or 1 million people buy it. It's a chair.
Right, you sit on it.
But in a network-based business, the value of the product increases geometrically with every single new user.
Telephones are the classic example of this, right? Like, if you are the only person on Earth with a telephone, it is a completely useless brick. Who are you going to call? But if 2 people have one, it has some utility. If 1 billion people have one, it becomes the foundation of global society.
Exactly. And once a platform like Meta or Google achieves critical mass, the network effect creates a gravitational pull that makes competition practically impossible.
Because the switching costs are too high.
Right. A startup might build a much better, cleaner social media interface.
Hmm.
But if all your friends, your family, and your professional contacts are on the incumbent platform, you cannot leave.
Right.
That is the inescapability of the platform monopoly.
And the extraction mechanism of these monopolies is incredibly subtle. I mean, Standard Oil would just hike the price of kerosene and the public would naturally riot. But a platform monopoly might not charge you a single dollar up front. Instead, they extract value by quietly degrading the terms of service over time.
Exactly. They inject a few more ads into your feed. They harvest deeper layers of your behavioral data to sell to advertisers. They lock you deeper into their ecosystem so your hardware only works with their software. It's totally invisible extraction. And this concentration of power inevitably triggers the debate over wealth limits.
Right. Which the dossier treats very impartially.
It does. It just outlines the theoretical arguments. So the argument for imposing caps on corporate valuation or individual wealth is that extreme economic concentration always eventually translates into political concentration.
Makes sense.
When a single corporation has more wealth than a nation-state, it can dictate public policy, it can crush economic mobility, and fundamentally distort the democratic process.
But the text also outlines the counterargument against direct wealth caps. Economically, arbitrary caps act as a massive disincentive. If you tell an entrepreneur that any value they create beyond, say, $1 billion will just be confiscated, you destroy the incentive to take the astronomical risks required to build paradigm-shifting technology.
And direct caps often just lead to capital flight, right?
Right.
Where the wealth just relocates to a more permissive country.
Exactly. Therefore, the functional mechanisms societies use to manage this aren't arbitrary ceilings, but structural regulations. So, antitrust laws to break up anti-competitive behavior, robust regulation of essential sectors like healthcare, and progressive taxation to redistribute some of those gains back into the public infrastructure.
Because the core danger isn't just the number in a bank account. Wealth itself is just a metric. The real danger is when that wealth solidifies into unaccountable power that completely bypasses democratic oversight.
This leads to, honestly, the most brilliant analytical framework in the entire dossier, the floor versus ceiling concept.
Oh, this part is fantastic.
It is. It says if we are trying to evaluate the health of an economic system, we shouldn't just look at GDP. We should look at the architecture of the society itself.
Right. And a healthy societal architecture requires 2 distinct structural elements. First, it needs an impenetrable floor.
An impenetrable floor. Okay.
The floor represents baseline stability.
Right.
It means that no matter what happens, a citizen has guaranteed access to the basic essentials required for human dignity and participation in society.
Yeah.
So, stable shelter, healthcare, essential education, clean water.
And the second element is an open ceiling.
Yes.
The ceiling represents the incentive structure for innovation, the ability to build massive enterprises, create sweeping wealth, and push human progress forward.
And the diagnosis of our current modern system is a severe structural imbalance.
Yeah, things are completely out of whack.
They are. The ceiling is completely blown off. We have individuals reaching billionaire status and corporations achieving multi-trillion-dollar valuations. The upper limit of wealth creation is totally unconstrained.
But the floor is actively collapsing.
Exactly.
The middle class is watching the basic building blocks of stability, housing, education, medical care literally slip out of reach. They were transforming from owned assets into unaffordable luxury subscriptions.
And this exposes the illusion of choice we are constantly sold.
What do you mean?
Well, you might stand in your living room and say, Look at the competition. I have Hulu, Netflix, Max, Disney Plus, Apple TV. The free market is thriving.
Right.
But if participating in the cultural conversation requires you to pay a monthly toll to all five of them because the ecosystem is intentionally fragmented,
Yeah.
that isn't competition. That is a coordinated industry-wide extraction event. The data monopolies outpredict and consume any genuine alternatives.
Oh, wait, we have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater here.
Right.
Let me push back on behalf of everyone who loves modern convenience. Because if we crack down too hard on these massive platforms, if we use aggressive antitrust action to smash Amazon or Apple into dozens of tiny, disconnected companies, don't we destroy the very magic of the modern world?
It's a fair point.
I mean, I like that my photos sync instantly between my phone and my laptop. I love that I can order a bizarre replacement part for my sink and have it on my porch in 48 hours. Heavy regulation threatens the friction-free existence we all clearly demand.
It is a vital counterpoint, and the text actually acknowledges the immense tangible value of scale and convenience.
Okay.
The solution proposed in the dossier is not a Luddite revolution. We shouldn't ban renting, and we shouldn't destroy the concept of cloud computing.
Right, we can't go backward.
Because a rigid, overregulated system can crush human autonomy just as effectively as a monopolistic one. The goal is not destruction. The goal is a fundamental redesign of our boundaries. We need to redefine what is ownable to protect human agency.
Which brings us to the final and I think most actionable framework of our deep dive today. The dossier calls it the minimum viable ownership stack.
The stack, yes.
Right. So if the reality is that we can't own everything anymore and the danger is that we shouldn't rent everything, what is the precise formula for a stable, autonomous life in this economy?
Well, the guiding principle is this. An individual should own the things that anchor their autonomy, their identity, and their long-term stability.
Okay.
Conversely, they should rent the things that are highly dynamic, temporarily needed, or rely on massively complex shared infrastructure.
Okay, let's actually try to build the stack right now. What are the non-negotiables that a person absolutely must own to remain autonomous? I assume number one is a house, right?
Actually, the text makes a very careful distinction here. It does not mandate that every single human being must own a detached single-family house with a yard.
Why not?
In dense urban environments, that's physically impossible. What it mandates is ownership over stable shelter.
Ah.
This means protection from arbitrary eviction and protection from predatory, wildly volatile rent spikes. Whether that stability is achieved through a mortgage or strong tenant protection laws or robust cooperative housing models, the outcome must be stability.
Right, because without stable shelter, mental health degrades, long-term planning is impossible, and community cohesion just vanishes. Exactly. It's about the permanence of the anchor.
Okay, second on the list of must-own items. The tools of production.
Yes.
Historically, if you were a blacksmith, you owned your anvil and your hammer. If you lost your job at the town forge, you still had your tools. Today, the tools are your laptop, your software, your internet access.
This directly addresses the software dilemma we opened the show with.
Right.
If your livelihood relies on an $80 a month software subscription and a financial emergency causes your credit card to bounce, you shouldn't instantly lose access to your past decade of creative files.
That's just cruel.
It is. So the dossier advocates for hybrid models to solve this. Own your baseline version, subscribe for updates. You should always retain the foundational ability to execute your work independent of a corporate server.
Third in the stack, data and digital identity.
This is a big one.
It's massive. Currently, we operate as digital sharecroppers. We generate the data by moving through the internet, but the platforms harvest it and rent it back to advertisers. True ownership requires data portability. Exactly. If I want to leave a social network, I should be able to take my entire social graph and my history with me to a competitor.
Fourth is cultural and creative media. Now, streaming platforms are incredible tools for discovery, right? You can explore thousands of artists for a flat fee.
Yeah, discovery is great.
But when you find the art that deeply shapes your identity, the movie that changed your perspective, the album that got you through a hard time, you need the ability to purchase a permanent, locally stored copy of it.
You really do. You cannot let the foundational texts of your personal identity rely on the licensing whims of a streaming executive.
And the fifth, crucial element of the stack, realistic pathways to asset building. A society must offer its citizens a mathematical mechanism to build equity over time. Without it, you are trapped in a perpetual consumption loop working simply to fund your monthly access to existence.
Now, on the other side of the spectrum, what should remain is a subscription.
Right, what do we rent?
Infrastructure is the primary category. No individual needs to own a server farm for cloud computing or a personal segment of the transatlantic fiber optic cable.
No, that would be insane.
Those are massively complex, shared systems that are far more efficient when centralized and rented. High flexibility services belong here too. Ride sharing is a perfect example.
Oh, absolutely. If you live in a dense city with great public transit and you only need a car twice a month to buy heavy groceries, owning a depreciating 4,000-pound metal box that sits parked 95% of the time is economically irrational. Subscribing to mobility via an app is just the superior model.
But then the dossier outlines the absolute hard limits, the things that must never be owned by anyone or any corporation.
Okay, what are they?
Natural commons are at the very top. Air, water, fundamental ecosystems. Because human survival is entirely dependent on them, privatizing them inevitably leads to catastrophic exclusion or environmental destruction for short-term profit.
Right. Fundamental knowledge is another hard limit. You cannot patent the mathematical formula for gravity. You cannot copyright the structure of the human genome.
Exactly.
Restricting fundamental truths behind paywalls cripples the forward momentum of the human species. And, of course, the ultimate hard limit, informed by the darkest chapters of our history, human beings.
Yes.
The absolute failure of the ownership model occurs when it attempts to override human personhood.
Now, to help the average person navigate all of this on a daily basis, the text provides a fantastic diagnostic tool. It calls it the danger zone.
The danger zone, all right.
Subscription models cross the line from a convenient service into an exploitative trap when it exhibits three traits. First, it engineers dependency without offering any pathway to ownership.
Okay.
Second, it extracts continuous financial value from you without building any durable value for you. And third, it possesses the power to lock you out of your own life or livelihood.
It really all boils down to the reversibility question. You have to ask yourself, can I exit the subscription system without severely damaging my life infrastructure?
Right.
If I cancel Spotify tomorrow, I lose my carefully curated gym playlist. It's annoying, but my life continues. But if I cancel my cloud-based smart home subscription, does my front door stop locking? If I cancel my software suite, do I lose my ability to communicate with my clients?
That's the test.
If the answer is that you cannot safely exit the system, then you aren't just paying for a service, you are leasing your life.
That lack of reversibility, that inescapable friction of exit, is the defining characteristic of digital feudalism.
Okay, let me try to synthesize this massive journey we've been on today. The objective here is not to retreat to some retro-utopian fantasy where everyone churns their own butter, hoards physical DVDs in a bunker, and refuses to use the internet.
Right, that's absurd.
It is. The objective is a conscious rebalancing. We are currently forcing scarcity-based ownership models built for physical land and plows onto an abundance-based digital world. And the resulting friction is literally breaking our psychological well-being and our economic stability.
It's a mismatch of systems.
Totally. We have engineered an absolute miracle of a system for delivering frictionless access to almost any tool or piece of art on Earth, but we have completely systematically failed to distribute long-term stability alongside that access.
It's true. We transitioned from a feudal system where monarchs owned everything to an Enlightenment ideal where the individual could own their destiny through property. And now we are slowly drifting back toward a digital feudalism.
Right.
Tech platforms own the digital land, they own the infrastructure of our communication, and they charge us a monthly toll just to exist within the borders of modern society.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I have a challenge for you, the listener. Do not just let this be an interesting hour of audio that fades away. Audit your life this week.
Yes, look at the reality.
Pull up your bank statement. Look at the apps on your home screen. Look at the literal physical objects in your living room. Ask yourself the hard questions. What are you actually building, and what are you merely maintaining? Are you accumulating durable stability, or are you just efficiently funding a tech company's monthly recurring revenue?
It's about intentionality, reclaiming the specific bounded spaces where ownership anchors your personal autonomy.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with one final mind-bending thought to chew on.
Oh, lay it on us.
We've spent this time talking about renting our software, our entertainment, maybe our cars and couches. But let's extrapolate this extraction model forward.
Okay.
As biotechnology and neurotech advance at warp speed, what happens when our very biology becomes a service?
Oh, wow.
Right? Imagine a future, and looking at current tech trends, it might not be that far off, where neural enhancements or essential life-extending health protocols are distributed strictly on a subscription basis.
That is terrifying.
If you face a financial crisis and miss a payment, do you lose your upgraded cognitive processing? Do you lose your extended lifespan? The line dividing what we own and what we rent is creeping closer and closer to our physical bodies. It is something we must deeply critically consider as we design the architecture of tomorrow. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems operating invisibly around you, and we'll see you next time.